This conference will now be recorded.
Well, thank you all for joining me on one more session of our virtual business networking. Today, we're very lucky that thanks to Jennifer Lau, who always helps me with all of these things, we have a wonderful, wonderful guest speaker, which is Becca Powers. I've sent a link to her book in all the emails that we've done. So you should have it in your email. But if not, I'll definitely send it out again tonight when I send out the recording. And she's going to be our guest speaker. Um, so basically, we're going to have three parts like we always do. The first part is I'll give everybody a minute or two to introduce themselves, say what they do, where they are geographically, what a good customer or a good referral for them would be. Second, and we'll try to keep this brief. If the introductions trigger a question or two from somebody else that's participating, we'll do that. And then after that, we'll turn over the balance of the time to Becca, talk about her book and talk about burnout. And hopefully, we can still have 5 or 10 minutes also of questions and answers for her at the end, because that's always, to me, the most fun part, and the way we take advantage of the fact that this is an interactive meeting, and you're not just reading the book, but hopefully you've done that or you do that after this meeting. um and my goal is to get you out of here somewhere between 45 and 55 minutes after the hour, in case somebody has other meetings or other commitments or other things like that. So, oh, one thing, please put your contact information in the chat, because again, I'll also send that out later tonight, in case people want to have spin-off meetings one-on-one after today's session. So with all that as a quick intro, I'm just going to call on people as I see them on my screen, and leave again Rebecca for last, so that she can take the balance of the time. So Paolo, if you could please take a minute or two to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Sal. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paolo Agostinelli. I am the owner of Equitas Funding Group. We are a real estate investment firm located just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We buy, renovate, rent, sell residential and commercial real estate in the area. I also am a member of the Pittsburgh Real Estate Investors Association. I lead our commercial real estate group. And I mention that for this group as well, because even though if I can't help you, I am part of a large network of small business owners, investors, property owners, different types of business owners. So again, if I can help you with something specifically, I'm more than happy to refer you someone in my network who can. So, and that's happened quite a bit over the last few months here, which I'm very happy to say. So, thank you for the inclusion on this, as well as our previous call, Sal, and look forward to our presentation this afternoon. Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely, thank you. And by the way, I've put Paolo's meeting in some of our chats before, but I'll do it again, because obviously it would be great if you could come to this one and also go to that one. There's no limit to how much networking and how much interaction we can do, and Paolo, I can attest, is a great source of connections and referrals, and really goes out of his way to help people. Patrick, if you could take a minute or two, please, to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm so interested in hearing what Becca is going to tell us, because I burnt out and burned up, but I didn't believe it was happening. And I was so bad, I couldn't dress myself. I was so inflamed, 20 times more than the standard markers. But I made a comeback, and I'm now on my bike, and I'm doing really well. And one of the reasons for this, well, the primary reason for this was I made a discovery about health and about a new technology, and where science is pointing to a whole new level, the cellular level. Now we have nutrition. We know about nutrition. We know about hydration, sleep, exercise, spiritual well-being. But now science is telling us about cellular health and cellular signaling at a functional level. And this is now possible by a groundbreaking redox technology impacting every organ and function in the body, including fatigue, brain fog, anxiety, and overwhelm. And this is so important because every second of every day our cells are passing tremendous amounts of information throughout the body. And any breakdown in that signaling and communication, we cannot be fully healthy. For instance, we get signals when we're hungry or thirsty or cold or tired or excited or fed up or want to go to the bathroom in the middle of the day or the middle of the night. These are all signals, and depending on our lifestyle, the quality of the signal can diminish. And when, for instance, it happened to my aunt when she was in hospital and she's wired up on a drip, and I says to the nurse, "Why is she on a drip?" She says, "People of this, in this space, they lose their sense of thirst." Now, you wouldn't think with all the pubs in Ireland, they're diminishing, of course, but you wouldn't think people are losing their sense of thirst, you know. So why do people go and drink beer? Because they're thirsty. They get a signal, but really they should be drinking more water. But look at for many people, this is now the missing link for better health and vitality, independently validated. It's 100% non-toxic, enabling us to have a real advantage. My details are in the chat.
Perfect, fantastic. And as you can probably tell, Patrick joins us from Ireland, which is always a big kick for me. Ken, please, if you could take a minute or two to introduce yourself.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ken. I'm with Comp Solutions. We provide IT solutions to small to medium-sized businesses that can entail networking, whether it's Wi-Fi, hardwired, cybersecurity, hardware, software support, troubleshooting, tech support. If it's technology, we can help. Ken with Comp Solutions LLC. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And Rhoda, same thing. I know you've been to almost every single meeting, so thank you for that. If you could take a minute or two to introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone from Indianapolis, Indiana. I am Rhoda Israelov, and my company is Say It For You. My team of ghostwriters and I write what you read when you go on our clients' websites, demonstrating to their web visitors that they are in the now and in the know. And I have a challenge for our speaker today. What I am hearing from business owners is not only don't their employees get to burn out, they leave right away. They have trouble hanging on to new employees for very long. So I hope you'll address that.
All right, fantastic. There you go. Another twist on the topic. Keith, if you could please take a minute or two to introduce yourself. And if you want to mention your activity, by the way, feel free.
Oh, okay. My name is Keith Moorhouse. I run a small private fund, invest in private companies. It's only open to accredited investors. Accredited investor is somebody that makes $300,000 a year if they're married, $200,000 if they're not married, or they have a net worth of $1 million exclusive of their home. You have to take the price of your home, the residence that you live in, back that out, and if you're worth $1 million, you're an accredited investor. I only do accredited investors because of the rules and regulations of the SEC, which are monstrous, to say the least. Anyway, the fund invests in small companies. Some are angel deals, some aren't, some have revenues. My latest investment is in a space company that's working with NASA for satellites. If you've read anything about satellites, there's hundreds of thousands of those going up into space very shortly, and there's a whole bunch up there that are just floating around causing damage. So it's a company called Rogue Space Systems. And if you want to look it up, it's roguespacesystems.com. I'm real interested in what Becca is going to say today. Becca, I don't know if you can see this, but I just bought this book. It's called CEO Excellence. It's the 6 mindsets that distinguish the best leaders from the rest.
That's great.
Yeah, I look at my portfolio of the companies that have failed. It's not because I misjudged their product or service. We were right on the money with that. It was the CEO and the board of directors just didn't do their job, just couldn't put the company forward. And I've got a couple that went out of business that really should not have. So
Wow.
I'm really
Wow.
interested. Yeah, it's in my business. It's typical to lose more than you gain as far as numbers, but the ones you win on are such big winners it makes up for the losses.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm very
Yeah,
interested to, I'm just holding back so we can get through the introductions, but as I hear
yeah,
everybody's comments,
yeah.
I'm like,
That's
okay, I could tie that in, can tie that in. And the things that I'll be sharing with you guys today too, I've surveyed over 8,000 people from C-levels down to individual contributors against all sorts of industries. So as we talk about burnout, I'll share all that stuff too. But so you guys got me all thinking. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. I said
Excellent.
my
No,
my
and seriously, that's one of the reasons I like to do this round of introductions first, even when we have a guest speaker, because it helps them get an idea of the audience, maybe their backgrounds, their interest, and tailor their presentation or conversation a little bit more. Um, and last but not least, Suzy, same thing. If you could please take a minute or two to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I would love to. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Suzy Simonson, and I get to draw out your confidence, your strength, and your determination to pursue the life that you want and leave all of your excuses behind. I am a stroke survivor. I had a stroke at 28 where I uh, had the mindset of a newborn. And so I needed to relearn every single thing. And the biggest and most powerful thing that I learned in recovering from my stroke is that you are exactly who your world needs. And if you shrink back, your world will go without. And the reason that I say your world is because the world can seem so huge and so large and overwhelming. And we have these big dreams that we want to take on the world and we want to do all of this. But what about our world? What about your world daily? So I encourage people to say, I am exactly who my world needs. And if I shrink back, my world will go without. So then that can motivate you to show up. It can motivate you to do the things that are inside of you to do. And it can combat the, am I enough, or the overwhelm, the burnout, all of that. When we can make it into bite-sized pieces, then it's easier to show up as we are. So my business is called Stroke to Success. I've got two sides of my business. I'm an international speaker and best-selling author, and then I'm also a success strategist. And so in that, the people that I would absolutely love to be in front of are hospitals and clinics. So healthcare workers is absolutely where I would love to be because there's so much overwhelm, and I'm coming from a patient perspective, but also how to give tools that they can have to have the most success in a healthcare situation. And with that, I can do that personally, so in person or via Zoom. And then I work with one-on-one dream clients. So a client that their goal is to make 100,000 or more in a year, and they feel stuck. They feel like they're not enough. They've got some plans, but haven't been able to think outside the box. Those are my dream clients. So I'm Suzy Simonson with Stroke to Success, and super happy to be here.
Well, thank you very much. Excellent. And I think you did it because I thought it coming across, but if you didn't, or if you want to do it again, please put your contact information
Yeah.
in the chat. Because again, later tonight, I'll send a video or a link to the video of the recording on YouTube out, and I'll
Excellent.
send out whatever people put in the chat also. All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
With all those introductions out of the way, I'm going to turn it over again to our guest speaker, Becca Powers. Thank you again very much for joining us. And thanks, Jennifer Lau, who's will watch it in the recording for
Hi,
connecting us.
Jennifer.
Yeah. And Becca, you have the balance of the time. Like I said, if you could leave
Great.
5 or 10 minutes at the end for questions and answers, I'm
Would
sure
love
people
to.
would appreciate it. And I don't want to steal any of your thunder, so if you want to even start by introducing yourself, that would be fantastic. And I turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I am Becca Powers. I'm a 20-year sales executive. I've worked for large Fortune 500 companies like Cisco, Dell, Office Depot. I'm in sales, as I've said, so high pressure, managing teams. So I consider myself a full plate girl, and I have learned a lot through experience, similar to some of the stories that were shared on here. So today I'm going to share with you. I'm going to rewind just so everybody, I know Sal's mentioned my book. So I am a best-selling author too. I published Harness Your Inner CEO, which is really my rise out of burnout. But what I learned as I wrote this book is that people just wanted more on burnout. Like, yes, the rise, but I think people, a lot of the information, this is what I got back from the readers, a lot of the information that is available on burnout right now is very either like academic, or it feels a little stretched from day-to-day life, and everyone's looking to understand it in a more practical layman way so that they can, avoid it or prevent it or understand it, all of those things. So I created a framework based upon some of the feedback. I had started outlining a little bit of it in Harness Your Inner CEO when I wrote it 2 years ago, but it's matured since. So what if it's okay, I'd like to share with you my burnout story, and then we'll talk about burnout. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So my burnout story stops and restarts on the bathroom floor. So of all places, that's where I fell to my knees in exhaustion. But in 2013, I was a first line leader at Dell, and I had a really big passion and belief that people come before profits. And that was my leadership mantra. People come before profits. I still believe it. But in that time, I believed it so passionately. Even when I was meeting with Jennifer back in the day, we would talk about things like that. And I would speak a lot at, local groups and networking groups and conferences and things about that, and had ended up getting recruited by a company that had a similar philosophy. Long story short, I left Dell, went to this company, and in going to this company, what I didn't realize is that I was leaving a technology industry, and I hear tech on here, Ken. I'm like, hi, Ken. um, so I left Dell to go to healthcare staffing, and then what I didn't realize is that the environments were completely different. How they work was different. How someone in tech were very, I would say the average salesperson in tech is very high achieving. We're very fast paced. We're moving and grinding and just innovating, and everything is done like in a big push. Healthcare staffing is very different. They look at their business different. I would say a little slower paced, and not behind times, but when you're in technology, you're definitely in the future and in the now. They were probably 5 to 10 years behind what I was used to working in. I say that because in my story, I got asked to tone it down by about 50%. And that was one of the key factors that started breaking me down, is how can anyone be 50% of themselves? Suzy was just kind of saying that you have to be your whole self. And I was a new leader. I was told that I was too much. I was asked if I can bring it down, scale back my spreadsheets, and a whole bunch of different things. The long story short is I did end up feeling like a fish out of water. I felt like I didn't belong. And instead of dealing with the circumstances, I decided to do what I do well and power through. I decided to lean on my resiliency. I decided to just keep going, and that I would figure it out, and that I would give it my best. My best kept me there for another 2.5 years, which included a lot of 12-hour work days, a lot of time away from the family. Even when I was home, I was working. Can you guys relate to any of that? Is anyone? Yeah. I see some nods. I'm like, just everything was high intensity with work all the time. Fast forward 3 years into the role, I had about 4 really bad 12-hour days. And I came home from work, and I did something that I probably had done multiple times but don't remember. But I had 4 kids in middle school. They run up to me, Mom, we're happy to see you. Let me tell you about our day. And instead of greeting them at the same happiness and intensity they are greeting me, I asked them if, this is not my proudest moment, guys, I'm just going to say this. I asked them if, I was like, can I put my effing purse down? mom needs 5 minutes. And I like exploded on them just for like rushing me. And time like stopped. And I remember seeing their smiles like turn to frowns. I remember seeing them go from like, straight upper back into curled down, feeling ashamed and guilty that they even approached me. And it made me stop and think, like, what am I doing all of this for? Why? What, is this the mom I want to be? Is this the woman I want to be? Is this the human I want to be? Like, what is going on? So all these questions start drifting in my head. And that night, when I went to go to bed, I took off my makeup, kids are in bed, husband's in bed, everything. And my fatigue and emotional exhaustion hit me, and I dropped to my knees. And I was so powerless and fatigued that I was unable to stand up. And what I know now that I didn't know then is that by the time I hit the bathroom floor, these are just the things that I was diagnosed with either a little bit before or a little bit afterwards. But by the time I hit that bathroom floor, I was diagnosed with 2 anxiety disorders, adult ADHD, chronic stress, chronic fatigue, autoimmune disease. So there you go. Inflammation was extremely high. I had formed arthritis in my hands. I lost dexterity. I couldn't open jars, and I'm 30, like 38, 39 years old. So lots of things going down. Hit that bathroom floor in my most powerless moment. I called out to God, universe, whatever you want to call it, and was just like, I can't power through another day. Like, I physically am on the bathroom floor. Like, I was at an all-time low, literally, and I needed some help. In that moment, I remembered, and this is what my first book, my debut book, is titled off of, is when I left Dell in 2013, my VP of sales was amazing. And he said to me at that time, he like understood leaving for passion and purpose with this people before profits mantra and mission statement that I had. And he had told me then that you are the CEO of your life. So as I'm broken on the bathroom floor, I remembered that I was the CEO of my life, and that it was that mantra or that memory that gave me the strength to rise. And once I rose off the bathroom floor, like my commitment back to God, universe, whatever you wanted to do, whatever you want to call it, is that I would never allow myself to fall again. And so that started my healing journey. And similar to what Suzy had said and Patrick said, there's this healing piece that happens. You learn and rediscover a lot about yourself. And that is what I wrote the first book about. But I am a researcher. I'm a little bit of a data dork. I always say, like, data helps drive decisions. And so I started researching. I tried to find out everything I could about burnout. I started studying trauma. I got certified in trauma. I got certified in shadow beliefs. I wanted to understand how I got there so that I never got there again, was really like the initial intent. And then I started working with other people and realized that a lot of people wanted the same things. And I was able to start surveying and experimenting, so to speak, and seeing if these frameworks worked. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is bring you into the 5 stages of burnout to help you kind of see what the framework looks like. The idea is that this framework helps you identify whether you're an employee or an employer burnout much earlier in the process so that you can do something about it before it's at the level of a stroke or 20 plus points on inflammation or autoimmune disease that brings you to your knees. Like, that's not where you want to be. So I'll go ahead and bring it up. And you guys, if there's any questions, we can keep this interactive too. I'll pause while I'm pulling that up to see if, let's see, window. I think this is the right one. Okay. Yep. Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, if just one question. If all of us met you a month before you had the breakdown, or you fell down in the bathroom, Becca, and we said to you, Becca, you're insane. You want to get a hold of yourself. We we think you're a good person, but you are terminally exhausted. And well, what would you have said to us? Would you have said, mind your own business? Yeah, I know, but we be giving you the logic, but would you have taken it? Would it have transferred to your heart? Would you have believed it? Do you know
Depends
the
who
way we,
was.
we look at people and they have a terrible diet, a terrible lifestyle, and we say to them, look, you need to do this, and then they have a heart attack and they end up in hospital and there are pipes and tubes coming out of them and beep, beep, beep all around them.
Mhm.
And they now everything changes because now they've had an emotional experience. You had an emotional experience, I had emotional experience, and others, I'm sure others have had too, where when you have an emotional experience, you're not, you're not convinced by logic, but an emotional experience will change, will influence you hugely.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And that's, I think, one of the things that I was um, able to capture with, let me see, view tab in Canva. Okay. That's one of the things I was hoping to capture with the 5 stages of burnout. So I'll bring it through and you guys will, I'll bring you through and we'll ask questions and I'll hopefully address some of that. So here's the 5 stages of burnout. And if you're familiar with anything from psychology, there is a popular framework called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which references what a human being needs to thrive, and he has 5 stages. What I learned as I was building this is that this mirrors, and I'll show you right here, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and so it kind of shows you what and why we go into burnout, because I call them unders and overs, and I'm going to go into all of this in further explanation. But just to kind of show you what here, when we feel undered, our basic security is threatened. Are we going to be able to pay our bills? Are we going to be able to put food on the table? And then that triggers our overs. And again, I'll explain more, which is in alignment to our safety. Am I safe here? I need to make sure I'm protected, and so on, so forth. So we'll kind of come back to this, but I just wanted to lay some basic framework so that if things made more sense as we go through it. All right, so here are the 5 stages of burnout, guys. The 5 stages of burnout, and this is the same presentation I just walked about 200 trauma therapists through, and they absolutely drooled all over it. They're like, this is so great. I interviewed and I surveyed and then also interviewed, but I surveyed 8,000 people. I didn't interview 8,000 people. That would be insane. But I surveyed 8,000 people. And what the data told me is that 98% of working professionals are either in or on the verge of burnout. 69% were in active burnout, and the other 29% were on the verge of. So going back to your point, Patrick, what I am hoping to answer is that if this framework is laid out well enough, people might be able to emotionally identify where they are earlier in the process, so they're not having to wait until they have a heart attack or a stroke or hit the bathroom floor. So that would be my ideal outcome. So I'm going to start with stage 1. So stage 1 is the unders. And if you see this right here, I mean, you can go ahead right now and kind of have live participation in this too. Burnout starts in the unders. It starts, so, you had asked, Rhoda, if what an employer's perspective would be on this too. So as an employee, and even going back to the CEO, I think, Keith, that you were mentioning, if I'll start as an employee or as the person, but then I'll also give a perspective as an employer. So burnout starts by feeling undervalued, underappreciated, underpaid, underrecognized, underestimated. Those were the top 5 that came back from the surveys, but there was also under-resourced, underutilized, underwhelmed. So there's a few more unders that came up, but these were the primary 5. And what happens here when you're feeling undered, I saw Oprah say this. She delivered a talk not too long ago, and it kind of, for me, gave an additional level of validation to what we're to this framework. But what's important to know is that the foundation of burnout starts before stage 1 even occurs, starts by us feeling unseen, unheard, and like we don't matter. That's the psychological foundation. A human being needs to be seen, heard, and felt like they matter to thrive. And when that is jeopardized, then we start the process of going into burnout. And the unders is the very first thing that's triggered. So the moment we feel undervalued, underappreciated, underrecognized, or underestimated, for an example, part of us doesn't feel seen, heard, or like we matter. And that is what triggers that. Does that make sense to everybody? You can just raise your hand or nod. Okay. I just want to make sure I'm talking about easy enough. So in psychology, and we talk a lot about it in the world of the shadow beliefs, but when a person is undered, when that is triggered, the natural response is to overcompensate. And that's why stage 2 is called the overs. Let me go. I'm flipping between screens. And so just a little patience. Okay. So stage 2 is the overs. And these were the top 5 overs based upon the surveys. When someone feels, and I want to relate it back to stage 1, feeling like your security is threatened. So think about this in a workplace. We are talking about the unders. If you feel undervalued or underrecognized or underappreciated, you might think your job's at risk. You might think something's wrong with you. And so your natural thing is that you want to show your value. You want to show your worth. You want to show, so you go into this over place. And so what I would say from a leadership perspective is an employer, if they want to keep somebody, if they see someone overworking, doing 12-hour days when the rest of the team is doing 9, that might be an indicator that they're feeling triggered and there might be some burnout stuff. If you see someone taking on way too many projects, like overcommitting, overextending is a huge sign of that stage 2, taking on more than they can really handle, overwhelming, overstressing, overthinking. So as the person, if you find yourself in any of these overs, you're on the verge of burnout. I say stage 1 and stage 2 is so important to understand, because to Patrick's point, this is where you can pull yourself out. You can realize, oh, I'm feeling undervalued. Okay, can I do something about it? Can I go talk to my leader? Is this a toxic environment? Do I need to leave? Like, you can start asking yourself questions way earlier in the process than when you're actively involved in health issues. So I'll pause there and just see if you guys have any questions. Okay, good. All right, we'll keep
Hey, Becca,
going.
just a quick
Sure.
question, and maybe it'll come up later in your presentation. But I work for companies very similar to Dell in the sense that, it was a very competitive environment, right? And frankly, I'll even say some of them were a pressure cooker.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so how do you balance this with the fact that the economy goes in cycles, right? At some point, people are going to get fired, companies are going to go under, there's shareholders demanding performance. Sometimes your boss is also burning out. He doesn't even have time to recognize you or talk to you, or
Mm-hmm.
because he's under all these other pressures too. So I guess how do you work that into the whole competitive, high stress environment?
I feel like the answer to that is on the individual. The employers have a lot of growth to do. So I do, similar how Susie's, like, she goes into the hospitals. I do a lot of leadership training in corporate America to kind of help with awareness of how their actions actually land on human beings, right? Like, these aren't just your employees producing a number. I understand that as people and profits, but we need to take good care of our humans. But I think that as far as the individual concerns, and I still work full time, and I keynote all the time and write books. And so I'm very, very busy. I think that what I have learned is the more I've advocated for my own health and I've put in better boundaries, I have been able to preserve my health and actually perform better, which sounds so, it's like a flip the script. When I was just working, and that's why I come back to this framework. When I notice myself overworking, overstressing, and I'm in a pressure, I'm tied to a quota all the time. When I push, and I'm sure you guys can relate to this, that you start making errors, then you end up the next day having to log in 2 hours early to clean up the mess you made from the 2 hours that you worked extra the night before. So it's kind of understanding your own wiring and knowing where you can push and where you need to come back. But I'll continue the stages, and it might allow us to answer that question a little bit more deeper. And if you get a different version of it, throw it at me too, and we'll keep going. All right, so stage 3 of burnout. Okay, yay, it's moving. I call it a case of the buckets, but it's also really called questioning belonging. And the reason I call it that is because I like to joke around, because humor is always appreciated, especially when you're talking about serious things. But this in an organization, this is where burnout takes root. Because this was when an individual starts considering, should I stay or should I go? Something's not right. I don't feel like I belong. I've been here a year. Joe's been here 6 months. He just got promoted. What's wrong? Like there's all this self-talk that goes on. And what happens here is that because our jobs are tied to our security, most people get stuck. They don't have the agency to leave. And so they stay and continue to overwork, overthink, overcommit, and stay in that pressure cooker environment because they don't feel that they can leave. And this is the stage that really attributes to all the severe health issues, which we're going to talk more about in a minute. But this is if you can realize that there's a term really popular right now, like quiet quitting. And this is the stage that people quiet quit. They go from maybe go in the overs to just like, okay, now I'm really going to only work my 8 hours and go home, because they obviously don't care about me. I'm employee number 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, and now I'm not looking to do a bad job. I want to, do what I'm paid to do, but I'm just going to do that, and I leave. So there's a lot of different flavors that happen in this stage, but basically it all attributes to not feeling like they belong to the organization or to their team. And so bringing it back to the CEO or the executive level, CEOs that have a failure that going back also to what Sal said, that just drive performance and don't drive employee well-being, their organizations will have higher turnover. They will see more dissatisfaction. They will have less commitment. So a committed employee who feels like they belong will put in 12-hour days when they need to. But then they'll also be respected when they want to take a family vacation and won't be pressured to work through it. So that's kind of what we're looking to do here from an individual standpoint, is to help individuals gain their own agency or ability to put themselves in situations where they're respected, and if they are constantly demoralized, or there's a lot of talk right now on toxic culture where the pressure is, don't take a vacation, don't do this, you can't do that. There's a lot of heat on corporations right now, especially the big ones like Cisco's and Dell's and Office Depot's. The Fortune 500s kind of take lead on how the rest of the corporations show up to stop that behavior. That makes sense?
Yeah, holidays are for crybabies.
Yeah, that's what stuff you used to hear. No, but like, yes, I mean, I can't tell you how many vacations. I mean, I've been in corporate sales for 20 years. How many vacations I never got to vacation?
I hope they paid you for them when you left, you know.
Oh, they paid me, but I don't know that I got to enjoy them. Everyone else is on the beach and I'm with my laptop hooked up at a hotel trying, working away. I mean, I'm sure people can relate to that. So, all right, I'm going to move on to the next. And so I talked a lot about this. I can share the slides with you too, Sal, so you can send them out in the follow up. I talked about should I stay or should I go? But I think for some of us on this call that started talking about health issues, or this is what happens when you stay in burnout. When you stay in burnout, your physical, I call it disharmony of the bodies, and I'm also a certified Kundalini yoga instructor. So I got hundreds of hours into the humanology and psychology of the human being. But um, the disharmony in the bodies, this woman, like she's going like on her lower back, and what's happens, we're so dismissal of our own signs and symptoms. Like I remember, if I'm going back to the burnout story that I just shared with you, when once I got called into the office and was told to tone it down, I think within 3 days I had like a lock in my neck. But I had also worked out. So instead of acknowledging that, hey, I was in this horrible situation where I just got asked as a sales leader to tone it down, that might be the problem. I was like, oh my gosh, I hurt my neck by working out, and just didn't really. Then we talked, Patrick mentioned gut issues. Like I ended up having a lot of indigestion and digestive type of stuff going on. And I just attributed it to, I don't really even know. I was just like, oh, I'm not feeling good lately. And I didn't stop to think that there was a root cause to what was happening. I was like, oh, maybe it's just pizza. Pizza is aggravating my stomach these days. But what I want to say about this stage 4 is disharmony in the bodies. Our bodies carry 80% of our wisdom, and our minds only carry 20%. So if you slow down enough to pause, and Sal, going back to like how do you handle high pressure environments, I think it comes to having the courage to say, am I in the right environment? If my lower back hurts, if I have indigestion issues, if my shoulders are tight. I delivered this to the trauma therapist yesterday, and so many of them came up to me and saying they're grinding their teeth at night. Um, like all these different things that they have been dismissing for a couple of years. And I'm like, well, guys, you're in burnout. And they agreed. But the other things that happen here is that's just the physical, but this is where you start to see anxiety disorders appear. We mentioned overwhelm. You start to see depression. You start to see withdrawal. Isolation begins. So maybe you were very connected to your family, but now you just want to be alone. Kind of how like I didn't have the space or the capacity to greet my kids. That's what kind of happens. A disconnection in your relationships happen. And if you stay in that state too long, then you go into stage 5, and I call it the devastation of the D's. But this is where we see the diseases come: autoimmune diseases, cancer, heart disease, suicide, overdose, uh, divorce, depression, debt. All of these things are a result of the unresolved burnout still just manifesting. And so that's the 5 stages. I'll pause and just see. I want to see how we're doing on time. We're at the 2:45, so that leaves us about 7, 8 minutes for questions. So I'll stop the presentation there and we'll talk.
Becca,
All
I'd
right,
like to share a
perfect.
comment if I
Sure.
could. I would like to get I wish was able to get a specific question on it, so I'm just going to share a comment.
Sure.
As I was listening to you go through these 5 stages, one of the a couple of the points of perspective that I had were, a lot of people close to me that are in industries such as, I mean, you mentioned you were in healthcare staffing, especially coming out of a post-COVID environment. a lot of either frontline workers, nurses, other medical folks who are experiencing PTSD-like symptoms
Yes.
and being torn between wanting to do what's best for the patients, but in some cases being gaslit into, you know, you know, being forced to stretch themselves to limits to help, for the sake of helping their patients, but at the same time they're operating in an environment where maybe their nursing patient ratios aren't what they should be or what they need to be, and so you have that additional layer. So in terms of, I mean, I think going back earlier in terms of withdrawal, I think that's where, that type of withdrawal, I think maybe some folks in that environment withdraw, and but then there's others where they're not able to because they're driven by that sense of purpose and doing what's best for their patients. It's different if I'm calling, a little bit different if I'm in a hospital, I'm an end user, I'm a patient versus, I need tech support on my Dell laptop.
Yeah,
A lot of
no,
different, both important, but
I
not really.
agree. And
So
that's one of the things that kept me, I mean, different and same is like what kept me in my burnout and pushing through when I didn't have capacity was that I had a team under me. I had physical humans. Again, different than patients. They're dealing a little bit more with life and death in some cases, but I find that people who do have purpose-based, mission-based, impact or change-based work tend to be the highest levels of burnt out.
yeah.
So when on the survey, just to validate what you're saying, health leaders of all different types of industries were amongst the highest. Anybody in a leadership role, anybody in a healthcare role. I had nurses, doctors, therapists, teachers were amongst the five um, top professions that are experiencing burnout. And then it went into like individual contributor, entrepreneur, and stuff under those five.
Okay.
Yep. And it's a problem, and that's there's the solution on an individual level is starting to prioritize yourself and putting in boundaries and just having to stick to them to preserve your own health. The sad part about healthcare workers is that their suicide rate is between nurses and doctors are at an all-time high. They've almost doubled over the last 2 years. So it's a real problem. But thank you for bringing it
Well,
up. It's super important to talk about.
Paolo, I'd agree with Paolo there about this dilemma people are in. Um, I want to do my best, but I'm exhausted. But look, I'll keep going for another while. I'll be okay. But this is where the culture of an organization is so linked to the manager. The manager says, "Look at Becca, go home. You're working too hard, and come back when you're rested. And don't let me see you for at least a week. And turn off your computer. I want you back here, powered up, freshed up, and ready to go." You know, because if you died in the morning, what would we do?
Right. And
You,
that,
you
but
know,
that
I
level
mean,
of compassion, I'm still working for Cisco, and I could say that they're very starting to go in that route. Like I was off for 2 days because I was delivering keynotes, and not a single person touched me. Like, and that's newer. That's 5 years ago that didn't exist. But there is so much work to do in corporations. I mean, I really do feel that not only is burnout real, but I feel like it's an epidemic.
Now,
'Cause
Becca, let me ask you a question because I've been disconnected from the corporate world and doing my own thing for the last 10 years. Uh, Two things. One is, of course, a lot of people are now working either remote or hybrid. Um, and of course, now there's a little bit of I'll call it a conflict or a tension between employers wanting people to come back to the office, employees, for the most part, wanting to stay at home or stay hybrid. So, how does that play into this whole burnout thing? Meaning, does working remotely help you avoid burnout, or does it cause more burnout? Because I've heard that on the one hand you have more flexibility, but then you tend to work more. So net, is it a positive, a negative, or
I
neither one?
I think that there's still a level of TBD. I think that the high I from the reason I pause is because belonging, you see, like when we go back to stage three, people start questioning their belonging. People are getting burnt out at home because now they don't feel like they belong as much. Like, this is why what you're doing is so important, just pulling a group together. People with the high levels of work from home now, belonging is being questioned. So maybe they're not having organizational burnout, but they're having life burnout because now that level of connection isn't there. If I'm looking at it from a burnout lens, from a burnout expert lens, what I would say is a hybrid would probably be the best, and probably like optional hybrid where they have an office, or there's like the WeWorks or different places like that too, where you have an option to go into the office 1 or 2 or days a week, but it's not mandated because people do have, life looks different now, especially for those who are raising kids or maybe taking care of parents, who are aging. Things just look different. But having that flexibility to have belonging within an organization, I think we'll see more of a hybrid role be enforced or offered as time goes on.
Okay, perfect. All right, guys, let's do something. The clock just turned over to 2:56 here on my computer. Do we have one last question? Somebody that wants to chime in that maybe hasn't had a chance, Ken or Susie or Keith or anybody else. I do want to get people out on time, but one very last question.
I've got one. Becca, I deal with a lot of young entrepreneurs, and they're so gung ho. I mean, they're going to take over the world. And when they find out they are not taking over the world, that it's really hard work, or their product or service just isn't the greatest thing since sliced bread, they start to burn out. And then I start to worry because I'm going to lose my investment. Uh,
Mm.
what would I do to comfort these people? What could I say to them besides giving them your book?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't even answer that. What I would say is if you're engaged with them, it all starts in feeling valued. Like if we go back to stage one, and I'll try to keep the answer concise, so I'm not bringing us back through another 5 minutes. But think of the opposite of this, right? If you can help them feel valued, if you can help them feel recognized, if you can help them feel worth it. An entrepreneur is, again, if you think of belonging as an essential need to thrive while you work, they're very lonely. They're not getting the am I seen, am I heard, do I matter met as much. So in your role, if there's anything that you can do to help um, reinforce those things, I think you'll see a positive response.
It's tough getting them to pivot away from their ideal dream that it's not going to work, but this will work.
Hmm.
I can just see them just draining as you're talking to them,
Oh yeah,
like they're
absolutely.
being crushed.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I'm asking people is, what does winning look like for you? And some people say, how do you mean? And is that a balanced life? I mean, do you want a pile of money and you lose your soul, or what do you
Right.
want? Do you want your health, or do you want, what do you want? And
It's
very often they don't know.
I would agree.
Yep. Okay, guys, let's do something. It is 2:58. Again, I want to get everybody on time. So first of all, thank you to everybody that's participated in today's session and for the questions and comments, because that's what makes it interesting and exciting. Thank you, of course, very much to Becca for being our guest speaker today. And if you haven't done so, please buy her book. I will plug it unashamedly. So
Thank you, Sal.
if you found the talk interesting like I did, and you want to get all the details, please buy the book. I've sent out the link already on Amazon. I'll send it out again with a copy of the recording. And if you want to join me, we do this exactly every 2 weeks. So next Monday, 2 weeks, on Monday, we'll do it at 2 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Becca. And I'm going to shut it down. So everybody, if you have a 3 p.m. meeting, you can't blame it if you're late on me.
Bye, guys. Nice to meet
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.